Hi, I'm Dr. Shyla Murgain, and I'm a health and sports psychologist at the University of Wisconsin. And I am one of the speakers for the Go Red Girlfriend Challenge. And I'll be talking today about maintenance of heart health, principles and practices. About a month ago, I spoke about goal setting, the importance of goal setting when we are starting a plan to develop exercise changes, nutritional changes, and work on getting healthy and lose weight. And I'm coming back a month later because we want to talk about how to make these changes stick and be for the long term. Oftentimes people get very excited about starting a weight loss program or starting an exercise program or making nutritional changes, especially around the new year. What we find is within a month or two, people start to go back to old patterns, unhealthy patterns. So we're going to address today relapse prevention and how to keep the momentum going and making those healthy changes that you've been doing for yourself. All right, so we're going to talk about a variety of things, and the first thing we're going to talk about is checking in about your healthy lifestyle goals that you've been doing and identifying strengths that you've been having, as well as identify and examine what's been challenging. So the first thing I want you to do is give yourself credit for what you're already doing. What changes have you made? What do you feel good about? Some of the successes that you can point to. And really look at what has allowed you to accomplish those goals. What strengths have you brought to those changes? And then also start to think about what has been challenging, what has gotten in the way, what are some obstacles that you can point to. All this will be helpful in terms of going forward and addressing some of those. So when we think about those obstacles, there's oftentimes several barriers that can get in the way of people working on a healthy lifestyle plan. Sometimes people have a lot of stress that can emerge. Sometimes people have challenging emotions that may lead them to overeat, for example. And sometimes life gets in the way, family responsibilities, work responsibilities. Sometimes it can be hard to carve out the time to exercise or to get to the grocery store, prepare a healthy meal. So just think about what has gotten in your way and what are some ways to start to address those barriers, obstacles, to get back on track. So we want to start to build momentum. I always say that the more we can start to make small changes, the more the momentum builds. For example, a ball that is stationary, it takes a lot of energy to get that ball moving, but once that ball is moving, it takes a lot less energy to keep the ball moving. In the same way, we want to build momentum. The small steps that we can take over time can really lead to large changes a year or two down the road. So as we build momentum, we want to come back to what inspires us, what keeps us going when it's challenging. And what I talked about in the first presentation was really identifying those values or themes or those things of importance that made you decide to work on health to begin with. And they could be having long-term health, decreasing medication, increased activity or enjoyment across the lifespan. Then we also want to find those things that fuel us to get to the gym, to make the healthy meal, and start to identify some of those. So what kinds of inspiration can you turn to time and time again to keep yourself going across the long haul? So one of the biggest barriers that I see get in people's way is stress. And we need to have some stress management strategies in place. And some common ones that can come about is how do we manage our stress in a healthy way? Oftentimes people turn to overeating, overdrinking, getting too busy, or not exercising, not taking care of themselves, just trying to plow through the stress. So doing some sort of recreational thing that brings laughter or a sense of play can be a really wonderful way of decreasing stress in the body. Just exercising in and of itself can help rebalance the physiology of the body. So instead of all these stress chemicals building in the body, physical fitness can help just calm that down in the body and get us back on track, and also can be a great way to keep working towards those goals. Sometimes when we're stressed, we're just doing too much. So having some quiet time where we can reflect, refuel, get back to our priorities or values. Carving out just some downtime for ourselves, a pause in the day-to-day activity, can be really beneficial. Also, spiritual practice for many people, contemplation, prayer, going to a spiritual home like a church or synagogue, that also can help reground us back to those priorities or what's important. And creativity, doing something that expresses that creative part of us, whether it's artwork or music or even cooking can be a creative act. Allowing that part to come through, that creative part, can also help us significantly reduce stress. So when I find that people are starting to slip in terms of their exercise plan or their eating plan or their health goals, one, asking them to focus on stress and reducing stress, but then another really important thing is to recommit to making yourself a priority. Oftentimes in our culture, we're reinforced for taking care of everyone else, whether it's at home or at work or friendships. And committing to health means you're committing to yourself and making yourself more of a priority. So there are three things that we can do to help us really make that commitment to ourselves. The first is managing our time well. We only have a limited amount of time that we have in a day or a week. We want to make sure that we're using that wisely. So oftentimes people will bring out their day planner and look at, over the course of the week, how have they spent their time. Was it in a way that was really meaningful to them, or was it in a way that they were doing things that didn't actually feel that great and left them drained and tired and overwhelmed? So oftentimes we will need to take a hard look at our schedule, and then coming down to the second and third point, maybe asking for help with some things. Maybe we need to delegate some of the tasks to somebody else so we don't feel like we're doing it all ourselves. And then the last thing is we also need to say no to some things, because in order to say yes to ourselves, we sometimes have to say no to other kinds of activities that aren't working for us anymore. So all of those can really help carve out that time that we need to engage in a regular exercise program or in a healthy nutritional plan for ourselves. Okay. The next barrier that can get in the way is self-talk, and in particular negative self-talk. So we often have negative beliefs about what is possible for ourselves. And maybe many of you have done diets before or lost weight and then gained it back. And so we may have belief systems in place that, oh, this program isn't going to work for me, or why bother? We want to start to become aware of those more negative belief systems and examine them to say, are they true or not? And then start to replace some of those back with statements that support us. We almost want like an inner cheerleader, inner coach in terms of our self-talk. So one, we want to give ourselves credit for what we're already doing. Two, we want to have patterns of self-talk where we're reinforcing ourselves for the small steps that we're taking. And then lastly, we want to provide self-encouragement for where we want to go, for some of those goals that we're working towards. So getting into more positive self-talk can be really helpful in keeping some of that momentum in place as we work towards some of those longer-term goals, not just the week-to-week goals, but where we want to be 6 months, 9 months from now. We know that change takes time, so the more that we can be a positive support for ourselves versus more of a critic or a complainer, those things don't necessarily serve us and actually can block our progress. So one, just really be aware of the self-talk, and two, find out whether it's affirmations or positive self-statements of encouragement. Start to give those to yourself and see how that might impact energy level and momentum as you go about continuing to work towards those goals. And then really another important point is we need support. We don't make change in isolation, and we make change in community. So finding people, for example, who have been successful in making healthy lifestyle changes, who have lost the weight, who have become athletic later in life, who have changed their diet, seek out some of those people, interview them, find out what did they do to get to that goal, what was a change in their mindset, how do they keep motivated during the difficult months, for example, during the winter, how do they keep on track. and find out some of those key things that really worked for them. That might help you as you develop your plan going forward. Also, the support network can be really important when you find yourself relapsing or falling back into old patterns. Reach out and talk about some of those concerns with the people that care about you. They can be wonderful sources of encouragement if you're starting to doubt yourself. And then lastly, it can be very fun to make these changes with other people. Maybe it's the people you live with or your work community or just your friends. For example, you may schedule a workout date once a week with your spouse. Or you may, as a family, go to the grocery store and pick out ingredients for a couple of fun recipes that you want to try. So it can be a source of connection, community, and bonding, and really committing as a family or in friendship groups or work groups to living a healthy life. So as we think about those times where it gets tough and you find yourself back in old patterns, don't get discouraged. We know that change takes time, and sometimes it can be a matter of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But the importance is that we continue to move in the direction that we want to go. So when we have those times where we find we're floundering or struggling or going back into old patterns, 1, we want to normalize it. We want to say, this happens, and then 2, we want to have a plan in place. So one thing we can do with a plan in place is say, what is one small thing I can do to get back on track, and then do it. And back to that initial analogy of a stationary ball, once we get that ball moving, it's much easier to keep moving. So if we find we're reverting back to old patterns, just do one healthy thing. You might schedule 10 minutes of exercise. You might park further away so you have longer to walk. You might skip dessert one night and add fruits into your diet. So you want to start to get some of those positive changes back on track. Or maybe you even call a friend and schedule an exercise date. So think about what's one thing I can do during the day. And then the second is we want to learn from what happened. So you might ask yourself, what did I learn from this? What important lessons did I gain so I can manage that obstacle challenge differently in the future? What do I need to put in place so this doesn't happen again? And that can be a way to make a negative or a relapse or a setback into a positive and actually develop more strength as we go forward. And sometimes what I have people do is if they're really struck is just to start recording, whether it's how much exercise they're doing, how many steps they walk, or even how many calories they're having in the day, or what they're eating during certain meals. And sometimes having all that information out front can once again help us see where we're at and then start to make some choices in terms of where we're going forward. And lastly, when we find ourselves struggling with keeping the momentum, I really want to encourage people to go back to the S.M.A.R.T goal setting formula. I went into a lot of detail about this in the first presentation, but I just want to talk about some generalities of how to use this tool when you're further along in your Healthy Changes program. So there is power in writing down your goals. So if you find yourself struggling, you've done something small, then I encourage you to set one goal that you can do during the week. And as you're setting the goal, you want to use that S.M.A.R.T goal setting system in order to help you set a goal that's achievable and will allow you that sense of success to get that momentum going again. So when you're using the S.M.A.R.T goal setting system, a reminder, you want to be specific. The more specific you can be with your goal, the better. We don't want to talk in terms of generalities like, oh, this week I'm going to exercise. Talk specifically about what activity you're going to do, when, where, how long. And that gets to the M. It should be measurable. It's not enough to say I'm going to eat vegetables this week. We want to know how many vegetables, what time of day, how many servings. So the more measurable, the better, because at the end of the week, we want to be able to clearly see, did I accomplish this goal, yes or no? And the measurable component is really helpful. It should also be attainable. We don't want to set ourselves up for more disappointment and failure by setting a goal that we can achieve during the week. And especially if we've been struggling, I really encourage people to set a very small goal that feels important to them. R is for reachable, and I often talk about this in terms of relevant. And what I mean by that is this should feel important to you. This should feel something that you are really committed to working towards. So if you find it's easier to start with exercise, set a goal there. If you find it's easier to eat something healthy or reduce caloric intake, start there. Start where you feel the most motivated. And then it should be timely when we're setting these goals. Send them week to week to week. Don't send a longer goal of a 6-month goal, because if we start to see ourselves having progress, then we have some of that momentum and enthusiasm to set the longer-term goals. Okay, so as I said, if you find yourself struggling, just set one goal or 2 goals that you can accomplish in the next week or 2. And then lastly, just reward yourself for accomplishing it. Take a pause, a moment, treat yourself to something, share that success with somebody else. Just take that opportunity to feel really good about what you are doing, and then start that process again, setting another goal for the next week or 2. So good luck. I encourage you to keep working with this, and just keep that enthusiasm up for all those changes that you deserve to make for yourself.